Welcome to the Jedburgh podcast. I'm the creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Each episode, I speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, and those dedicated to winning no matter the challenge. The Jedburgh podcast is founded in the lineage of the special operations Jedburgh teams of the past and is produced in partnership with Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm focused on helping you optimize the people side of your business. We're sponsored by Jersey Mike's Subs. Together, we share the mission of giving, making a difference in someone's life. Visit the Jedburgh Podcast, Talent War Group, and Jersey Mike's Subs on the web and on all social media. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Green Beret Foundation, supporting America's Special Forces and their families.
And you know, freedom isn't a gift. We weren't just given a gift of freedom. We were entrusted with freedom. We're responsible for freedom. And if we don't teach the next generation, and how we do that is through the stories of these men and women that served and how great they are. But if we don't teach our next generation that, as Ronald Reagan, another very smart man, we're one generation away of people letting it slip away. Just give up your freedom for your comfort.
This December 17th, thousands of volunteers across all 50 states will lay over 2.6 million wreaths on the graves of our fallen soldiers. Remember, honor, teach. That's the mission of Wreaths Across America. It's a tradition that started in 1992 when Morrill Worcester looked for a meaningful way to distribute a few hundred excess holiday wreaths. Today, convoys of wreaths leave northern Maine for a trek across the country to over 3,600 cemeteries. I've been following Wreaths Across America for a few years now. So for this episode, I asked Wreaths Across America's Executive Director Fran Worcester to join me for a conversation about December 17th and how her family has turned her husband's childhood inspiration into a national movement. Fran and I discussed the growth of Wreaths Across America and how a 2005 snow-covered picture from a forgotten part of Arlington National Cemetery changed their lives. She shares the stem to stone process, and we talk about why our generation must remember our fallen, honor those serving, and most importantly, teach our children the value of freedom. We take a lot for granted in this country, but freedom is certainly not free. It never has been, and it never will be. Take a listen to my conversation with Fran on your favorite podcast platforms. Watch the full video version of our discussion on YouTube. Subscribe to us and follow at Jedburgh Podcast on all social media, and check out our website, jedburghpodcast.com. The Wreaths Across America convoy will make its way from Maine to Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. this week. Go to wreathsacrossamerica.org to see the route, get involved, and meet the convoy along the way. I know I will. Click any of the links to sponsor a wreath, volunteer, or donate to one of their many programs to remember, honor, and teach the next generation what it means to be free. Fran, welcome to the Jedburgh Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Fran. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited because we have been talking about this episode for a year now. I realized this week because last year at this time, I asked Peter Cancro, CEO at Jersey Mike's, to come on, and he has been so instrumental in my organization and the Jedburgh Podcast and supporting us, and also in what he's done for and what Jersey Mike's has done for Wreaths Across America over the years. But we talked all about Wreaths Across America last year at this time. We launched our short form series, Jumping In. Jumping In number 1 was with Peter on Wreaths Across America. And I said at that time that when we go into 2022, I was absolutely going to want to speak with you, talk about Wreaths Across America, talk about their mission. I told you I tried to get up to Maine last week, but it was way too chaotic with now my 3 kids and at my in-laws in New Hampshire. Just couldn't make it happen. But we're going to make up for it later this year and come up and visit you and document this whole thing in video. But I so much appreciate you sitting down with me here today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I love to talk about Wreaths Across America. And I thank Peter for bringing us together. He's as we were saying, before we came on the air, he's a great man, good character, and he's helped a lot of people.
Well, let's talk about Wreaths Across America. This year, the organization is going to lay hundreds of thousands of wreaths at over 3,400 cemeteries across all 50 states. But it all started when Morrill was 12 years old and he visited DC and Arlington National Cemetery. Can you talk about that trip and talk about that inspiration and how it shaped him?
Well, I think like most kids at 12, he wasn't thinking, well into the future and all that. And
What do you
he
mean?
made
My
her.
daughter tells me every day I don't know anything, and she's got life figured out.
Well, it's gonna get worse, just for the record. But
Yeah.
no, he did win a trip as a paper boy. He's always been, ambitious, and he went and they saw a lot of sights, and he got in a little trouble here and there. And but one of the things he remembered was going to the cemetery and seeing how beautiful it was. And it wasn't like he formed a plan then. Fast forward many years, it was actually in 1992, and we had always been in the balsam business and did a lot of mail order balsam wreaths for big catalogs and stuff like that, and wholesale wreaths. And we had some left over that year. It was about the middle of the season, and he'd always been very patriotic, and he just thought he'd like to do something meaningful with these leftover wreaths. And he said, maybe I could just go back to Arlington and place these wreaths on the graves just as a thank you. And you reference your kids. He thought if he took the kids, it'd be such a great experience for them to see what he had seen. So he enlisted the help of a couple local politicians. They made a couple calls, and unbelievably, we got permission to take those wreaths to Arlington. So he reached out to a local trucking company, friend of the family, Bluebird Ranch Trucking Company. They put 5,000 wreaths on the truck, and away they went, kind of like Jed Clampett, here we come from down East Maine. And they got to the cemetery, and they were actually taken to the oldest section. I think it's 20, I want to say 26, could be 27, but it's the Civil War section.
Hmm.
And they started laying those wreaths, and they had, I don't know, 8 or 9 people there to help them, and a couple of the kids. And what they noticed is it was fascinating. You couldn't lay a wreath without reading the name and wondering. And in that section, there are civilians, there are unknowns. It's a real piece of history. And so when they got back, they just couldn't stop talking about it. And they were looking people up and trying to, piece these people's lives together, and it really impacted them. So we decided if we could continue that we'd go every year, and every year after that, we made the wreath special. He'd take a couple volunteers and meet a couple volunteers, and they'd take all day to place 5,000 wreaths. And one section at a time, they kind of did the whole cemetery. So then, fast forward to 2005, and oddly enough, it was the first year that I was actually able to make the trip. And we have 6 kids, and the 2 younger girls were homeschooled, so I was able to take the 2 girls that year. We were back in that same section, back in the Civil War section. We made the loop, and it had snowed that day. It was beautiful, and a Pentagon photographer happened to be there. Happened to be in the
Hmm.
cemetery for something else, and he took a picture of the wreaths. It went on their website, in their news on their website, and life changed drastically after that. My husband is he's not a white collar guy. He's a hardworking guy. He has a website and an email that he had never used
Hmm.
ever. It was there for business. And by January of 2006, he literally had thousands of emails, thousands of
Wow.
calls. Is this real? Are you really doing this? How can we do it? We want to get involved. Um, People would call us that were deployed, and get on the phone with my husband, and just, I still get emotional because I don't have to tell you, because of your service, if you've lost somebody, you served with somebody, that the fact that they're being remembered, it matters. And so we were just listening to these people, and can you come to our cemetery? Can you do this? Can you do that? So as we got towards the end of 2006, we wanted to do something. So we couldn't send 5,000 wreaths to everybody. So we came up with the idea we'd do these ceremonial wreaths, one for each branch of the military, plus one for POWMIA.
Hmm.
And so we did that, and they wanted more. They wanted us to stop on the way, and then people were telling us, like they were saying, people are listening to you now, so you need to talk about this. And the veterans would tell us this, and the Gold Star families were saying, we want this message. So the Worcester family like didn't have this major plan. We were doing something that mattered to us, and we were using as, enriching our children's lives and reminding us during the holidays why we're free and what's important. And we were just lifted up by people who wanted to be involved. And so by 2007, we did do the 501c3. So
Mhm.
from that humble beginning through 15 years of just the family, and then the power of the internet, and we actually are at 3,600 locations, and we're on
Wow.
track to place about 2.65 million wreaths this year. I love it.
Wow.
We have
2.65
volunteers.
million wreaths.
It's crazy. Very volunteer run. It's every location has a volunteer coordinator, and they make it personal about their community. It's their veterans they're honoring. So we all do this together. We do it at the same time, which is crazy. That it just happened. It's such a hyper local effort. Um, but yeah, it's those volunteers that go out, they get the sponsorships, they put the programs together, and they feed us. We listen to them. We share a message, we bring the message together, and we really have our finger on the pulse. We have people all over the country, and it amazes me with so much discord at the top that down
Mhm.
here, in the trenches, people still love their veterans, they love their country, and they love their neighbors, even though they might have some differences. So we love Wreaths Across America. It gives us an opportunity to show kids who we are.
Let me ask you about the process because we said that this started with bringing down a couple of hundred wreaths, and now 2.65 million. You termed the process stem to stone.
Hmm.
What does that look like when you actually have to go out there and I mean you have to grow the tree and then you have to create the wreaths and then there's the distribution. So talk a little bit about what you're going through right now to get these things produced and out there.
Well, so things have evolved to the point that at this point now, my husband, the founding company, they are the vendor for Wreaths Across America, which is a separate entity, but it's a bid process, so it's kind of separate. I know you'd hoped Morrill could be here, but as you can imagine, he's busy.
No,
But
he's busy.
yeah,
So are
there's a
you.
yeah, yeah. We hardly see each other though because we're kind of in separate entities, but. I don't know how many acres he has in production at once. If I had to guess, I'd say there's about 20,000 right now. He has a lot
Wow.
more, but it's every third year that the branches are tipped, and
Mhm.
we don't cut the tree down. We just take the branches, and they're harvested, and it's quite a process. There's probably 200 workers out in the woods just picking the brush. It takes about, and you can do the math if you're better than me, but to do 2.65 million wreaths, and you put about 4 pounds into each brush into each wreath. Then it's trimmed, and of course there's waste, but that's how much brush has to be harvested. There's probably about 600 workers right now. A lot of them seasonal, but the local community is very much involved to support people and all that. And yeah, they go 2 shifts a day, and takes a lot of time
Wow.
because you can't start until it gets cold enough and the weather's right to start. And it's kind of crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, I cut down my first Christmas tree last week, so I know that's in no comparison. But having to go out into the woods and do that, just on with the family, I can't imagine trying to do an
Yeah, well,
operation of this
it's
magnitude.
evolved. I mean, it's like anything else. It's like my husband, the wreath business kind of has evolved. He was very actually instrumental in really pushing mail order wreath business. It was almost unheard of before he got involved, and so he's very creative. So as it's gotten bigger, things have gotten streamlined, and it's like Peter Cancro, how he makes his sandwiches. There's a process, and everything gets easier and better as the time goes on. But it's just amazing how much people care. And then, for me, what's equally amazing to the work that we do, and he does in the woods, the fact that 90% of the wreaths are delivered on volunteer trucks, and,
Mhm.
and the trucking industry is critical to this. And they come from all over the country. They make the trip to Maine, And we have the whole community. It just turns into something different. It's like, the North Pole Santa's workshop got nothing on us. I'm telling you, because we now have
Your
a
Santa's
truck.
workshop.
Yeah, that's right. I'm Mrs. Claus right here. But we have a truck stop. We have, my husband put up turned one of his buildings into a truck stop. So these drivers come in, they have showers. Tyson's Foods comes in and feeds these truck drivers for, like 10 days. They do more than, probably this year it'll be 2,000 meals. So these guys have hot showers and places to be. So people from the community will bring in cookies and, stuff like that. And it just becomes this everybody working towards this goal. But it's all about people working together, and it's all about volunteerism. Like I said, every single location, it starts with somebody stepping up. And it's just like anybody that chooses a cause. I mean, people who might be, you know, having a 501c3 for breast cancer is because they know somebody or love somebody that had breast cancer. People who are doing this, remember on a teach mission, are 9 times out of 10 somebody who had somebody that served, somebody that they really understand the importance. But it's just evolved in so many ways that everybody has an opportunity to serve. One of the things that, and again, separating Wreaths Across America from Worcester, which is the founding company, Wreaths Across America, early on, we made up our minds that we were going to work with other people, that we couldn't have a mission to remember, honor, and teach and not work with other organizations that were doing the same thing. So everything from, VFW's, American Legions, DAR, to Gary Sinise, to the smallest, group of Girl Scouts who might be trying to raise money for a service dog in a small community. We work with those organizations, and for $15, a wreath can be placed at any one of our locations. Volunteers will do it. But $5 goes back to that other participating organization. And by the end of this year, we'll have given back almost $20 million to those other organizations to take care of living veterans and causes within the community. And it's just a good plan of working together for the greater good. Our teach mission is incredible, and we do the same thing. And I can stop and let you get work.
No, I want to ask about this mission here of remember, honor, teach, because it's kind of this 3 pillars that sit behind the organization. And you have a quote on the website that I think is important to read here, and it was by Pierre Claessens, and it says, "To be killed in war is not the worst that can happen. To be lost is not the worst that can happen. To be forgotten is the worst." And you've rallied the organization and this entire community that you spoke of that involves so many, individuals, businesses, major companies, that are out there supporting this, the trucking industry, everybody that you talked about, including the small organizations. But you talk about remembering our fallen U.S. veterans. How do we continue to do that in a time today when our military is not going to be in the forefront? It's not going to be at the top of the fold, as I call it. But we had this conversation about Veterans Day here over the last couple of weeks, and we covered the Veterans Day parade live from the red carpet a couple of weeks ago, and it was a big topic of conversation. How do we keep that commitment to remember the fallen as we go into the next, what we see as the foreseeable future?
For me, it's how do we not? I had the opportunity great friends. I'm great friends with Roger Donlin, who was the first Medal of Honor recipient for the Vietnam War. Amazing man. And he got his medal back then, so he's had it for like 60 years. He's seen a lot. He's been everywhere. Very involved with the Medal of Honor Society, and has just been a mentor for me. And it's been about 2 years ago now, and I said, Roger, what is the most important thing Wreaths Across America can do? And he didn't miss a beat. He said, we need to teach our children to love this country. They're being bombarded with information, that is not teaching kids the value of freedom. And freedom isn't a gift. We weren't just given a gift of freedom. We were entrusted with freedom. We're responsible for freedom. And if we don't teach the next generation, and how we do that is through the stories of these men and women that served and how great they are. But if we don't teach our next generation that, is Ronald Reagan, another very smart man. We're one generation away of people letting it slip away. Just give up your freedom for your comfort. It's so important. So we have to, and it's still not even enough to remember. We can't just pull out our flags and say, "Oh, remember," or just in your case, like just to say thank you for your service. That's not enough. I should say, tell me about where you served. You tell me what you learned, because what you know is so important to what we teach the children. That's what we try to bring together here. And when you have somebody like a Roger Donlin that tells you that's what needs to be done, you take it to heart. So teaching children not just to remember, but the why it's important to remember, I think it's just critical.
Well, and that's that third component, teach our children the value of freedom. I mean, I think that, we as this generation of veteran, we can't forget that. It's so easy to fall back into our lives, and go about our day and not sit down and, and actually have the conversations about what you said, about what we learned. Because telling the story is important, but understanding the value of the story, sharing the value of that with this next generation, I think is so critical, especially at a time where they're not going to hear about it every day. And I think we're in an interesting position right now where we've seen the largest influx of veterans into Congress since the post-Vietnam era. And we're really in a position where we can make a significant impact and really show the country, what Wreaths Across America is talking about with this third principle of teach not only our children the value of freedom, but remind everybody in the country about the value of freedom, because we're Americans and we have short memories and we get very focused on a lot of other things, most often whatever's being pushed on our phone to us. And that becomes our entire world. And, we've forgotten over 21 years what this country, has gone through and what it's sacrificed. And there are many people now who are in positions to share this. And I would encourage all of them, as you said, to get out there, share their story, talk about it, and get involved with organizations like Wreaths Across America who are making it a core component of their mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about it now, years later into this, but when we were just taking wreaths, it made us feel good, and it gave us an opportunity to teach our kids. But it wasn't until I started talking to Gold Star mothers, and people have heard me speak. I share it was like 2007, I think, was the first time that a group of Gold Star mothers went. It was 6 or 7 that a group of Gold Star mothers went on this convoy with us, which convoy now, we used to just go down and back, but because people asked us, we now take a whole week. We'll make more than 20 some odd stops at schools and BFW halls and, wherever they want us to stop. And they bring their veterans to us, they bring the kids together, and we teach. But, I wasn't that smart before I got talking to these people. And I remember that first night, it was late at night. It was the night before we were going to leave on the convoy. And my husband's secretary had gone to the airport to pick up this group of Gold Star mothers. And I had talked to a few moms on the phone, but I had never met a Gold Star mother in person. And these women, I could have killed his secretary because, I was supposed to meet him the next day. And I'm sitting here in this little makeshift office. It literally was a closet. And I hear him coming up the stairs. And I'm like, I don't know how to talk to these people. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's like, I didn't want to say the wrong thing. And so they came in through the door and they said, "Oh, I'm and my son and then my daughter, do you have children?" And we talked and it was wonderful. They shared about their kids and I shared about my kids and we talked about it, being excited about the trip. But I still get emotional about it. What I remember is that they left and I went down the stairs to drive home. I was only a couple miles from the house. Got in the car, I'm driving down the road. I had to pull over because it dawned on me that we just talked, and they talked about their kids the same way I did mine, but I could go home and call my kids up. And what they have is to keep that memory alive. And it's important to them because they don't want us to think about the children's death or their husband's death. They want us to think about the life. It's life that they sacrifice so that we can be, fat, dumb, and happy. And it's important to them. And then you look at this group of people, these Gold Star families, who have buried their children, their husband, their loved ones, and they love this country with passion. It's you can't be around these people and not be affected and not have it change your life. And so I get so excited when I know that, on the 17th, 3 million people close to will be out in 3,600 locations. A third of our volunteers are kids that get taken to these
Hmm.
cemeteries who get to stand in line to get a wreath and maybe meet a Gold Star mother for the first time, or maybe hear somebody talk about their service, or maybe meet somebody who's lost their limbs in service, and it becomes real and it becomes more personal. That's what has to happen. They have to know that this person's loss, this person's history is part of their future and their heritage. They have to own it. And it's easier for children when they talk to somebody that shares that story to make that connection. You can't just get a history book out and say, well, I mean, I don't like Vietnam. I don't even find it in a history book. You know what I mean? It's just the
Right.
history books are pretty basically go to the highest bidder. Depends on where you are in the country. It's not political. It's just real. What's in these books is not what kids need to know. We don't talk about the conflict because, frankly, that happens up here. We talk about what happens in the heart. These people that sign up and go to war because we are good and we teach our kids that they are good and that our country is good. And there's just something about the wreath is simply a catalyst. It brings us together with something tangible so people feel like they're doing something. But it's what happens at those, I get very emotional about it. It's what happens there. It's what happens at the event that makes this grow like it grows. It's not about decorating graves, it's about making connections. And we need that. We need that in this country.
Those are the hardest conversations that I have. People say, "Well, you talk to this famous person and this famous person. What was it like?" And I say all the time, absolutely nothing compared to Sarah Wilkinson, gold star spouse who I've had on a couple of times, or the Day family, whose son took his own life and died by suicide and was my neighbor and my best friends. Those conversations are so hard, but also so important because I think
Mhm.
that we grow from them and we share those stories and we honor. You talked so much about honoring. We honor their lives and we honor their service and we honor their sacrifice, and it does make each one of us remember what we have and what we have to live for and stand up for, and not allow to be degraded or forgotten. And we owe it, as our generation, to continue to carry that mantra and carry that forward. So you've got two
Absolutely.
weeks.
Yeah.
You got 2 weeks. What's going to happen here over the course of the next 2 weeks? This is going to come out about a week before before the 17th. So what's going to happen here?
Well, everybody's busy. What's crazy about what we do is that we'll do all that number of wreaths, and about half of all those sponsorships are just coming in right now. So we have trucks that are waiting to see how many wreaths. We have trucks that are waiting to see where they are going to go. We have location coordinators, doing their last minute preparation. We have a few rules for the ceremonies. They have to be all inclusive, not political, and
Mhm.
just stay on track to the mission. But everybody's preparing. By the middle of next week, we will have Gold Star families and veterans coming from all over the country to
Mhm.
join us on the convoy, which is a once in a lifetime experience. But I'll tell you, when they come here, there's a lot to see and do. We've been so fortunate. Our office is it's very humble, but it's a school building. It's where my oldest kids went to grade school, and it's become a museum. Not again, nothing that the Worcester family said, "Hey, let's do this." It's because people started bringing things to us. Um, I think there was a lot of Vietnam things here because Vietnam was so difficult, and when men came home and they weren't treated well, and they had a lot of issues. And I think it just created a different time in our country. I think things changed a lot in the aftermath of Vietnam. But then you fast forward a little bit, and families break up, and and they don't really want to throw Uncle John's uniform away or his pet, you know what I mean? So they
Hmm.
bring it to us, and then we try to put the stories together. So in the halls of this old school are just hundreds of stories. And, we have the honor to have Gold Star families bring their loved ones' uniforms here so that we can tell the story. So within this old school, they'll come and they'll see all these stories. It's kind of the museum is spilled over into what we call a history and hospitality home, which is a free bed and breakfast for Gold Star families from anywhere in the country that can come and stay here. And every room in the house, because of these things we've been gifted, represents a different area of conflict. So you walk back in time. You walk in a bedroom
Wow.
that's from 1776, and kids can see what people wore and how, yeah, one of the things that we love, not 1776, but when you get up to World War One and forward, kids are fascinated with Sears and Roebuck catalogs. Not anymore because everything's online, but the old Sears and Roebuck catalog gives you a pretty darn good look at history, what people were
It
wearing,
really
what
does.
it really does, and it gives the tour guides an opportunity to talk about that because that's what matters to kids. What were kids doing?
Hmm.
What was this? What was that? And we don't we have information on the conflict, but that's not where you're going to reach kids. It's things that first bring them in and then get them interested. We've been so blessed. Our teach curriculum, which can be found at wreathsacrossamerica.org, but also at Teacher Paid Teacher. It's free, but it's available at Teacher Paid Teacher. And you talk about an amazing story. Cindy Tatum, Gold Star mother, retired teacher, and she has wrapped her arms around our teach mission. And in the same way that we work with other organizations to do sponsorships, we formed an alliance with the Medal of Honor Society, Ike Eisenhower Foundation, Random Acts of Kindness Foundation, the Rosie the Riveter movement, and God, there's more. I've left. Oh, the Vietnam 50th commemorative. And we share their information, and we are being downloaded on Teacher Pay Teacher at an incredible rate. And it's
Wow.
not just to private schools, it's homeschooling, private school, and public schools that are looking for these materials that are teaching. And I love what you do, and I look down through the characteristics of those that are special ops. And we actually teach with our wreath, and my husband wrote a poem for a Gold Star family many years ago and explained because each wreath has 10 boughs of balsam that go on it.
Hmm.
And he did pretty much the same thing. He said as he makes a wreath, he thinks of these 10 characteristics, and they're very much in line, your characteristics and ours, because they're, a belief in a greater good, discipline, sacrifice, just things that kids need. They need to be taught. We teach our kids now not to be offended. People, we want our kids to be safe and happy, but they have to learn resiliency and they have to learn responsibility. And freedom comes with responsibility. And I think that's why we do with the wreath. We let kids actually build the wreath and talk about each component of the wreath. And we're just so fortunate to have these opportunities to teach, and they come from other people. um, I'm very long-winded, but let me tell you about Cindy Tatum. um, on Christmas morning, her son was actually he was in
Mm.
state, in training in state, but he couldn't, in the country, not in her state. But they had talked and he was not going to be able to be home for Christmas. So Christmas morning, the Tatum family is having a tree, and a car pulls up, and they see a uniform get out, and they think he's home,
Hmm.
and he'd been killed in an accident on Christmas morning. And the most amazing woman you'll ever want to meet. They're involved in this teach piece, and little things that she says that makes it real. Like she and I were talking with a group of people about things that momentums and stuff, mementos, and she laughed and she said, "My son would know what to think of me because one of the things that I've held on to is his superhero's underwear from when he was a little kid." But think about that. Think about the sacrifice. And she has literally thrown herself into serving others, and that's how she is healing.
I love these 10 these 10 characteristics that you're putting on these wreaths. I think it's going to be important that we share that, and I want to share that and compare that to what we talk about here. And it's so true. I look at my son, I look at my kids, all three of them every day, and having had the experiences that I've had, I often think about what would happen if they were called to serve. And one of the conversations I had with Lieutenant General Ken Tovo, he's the chairman of the Green Beret Foundation right now, and he was the commander of this commanding general of Special Operations Command, the Army Special Operations Command, is our job is to create an environment where our kids don't have to go to war. And I also said that if they do, we want to make sure that they're not fighting the same war we did. And I think that that's so important as we look at this next generation, and we look at our duty to teach, as we talked about. I want to ask you as we close out here, I caveat it this way: the Jedburghs of World War II, they had to do three things every day to be successful. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, and they had to be able to communicate. If these were their core foundations, their habits that they were highly effective at every day, then they could put their focus and their attention on more complex challenges that came their way. What are the three things that you do every day, and specifically probably what you're going to be doing the three things every day for the next couple of weeks in the busiest time of year as you prepare for December 17th? But what are those three things that you do every day to set the conditions for success in your world?
Well, it might be a little different what I do as the executive director.
In life.
So were you asking me as the executive director, or as Karen Worcester, the middle of in life? The three things that I do every day. And we're a non-religious organization. Fully understand that people serve from all faith or no faith, but I pray. I pray. And then I'm fortunate to come to work in a place where you're reminded daily. Like, I can get caught up in the work. There's a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of, everybody isn't nice, and there's issues that come up and things that you have to deal with, and some days are frustrating, some days are hard. But I have the opportunity to walk out in the halls of this old school and see the uniforms that these Gold Star mothers have left here. And that is such a stark reminder for me. And it always brings you back around. And there's always a priceless story. We will hear so many stories over the next 2 weeks and on the convoy and all that. But I think gratitude for living in a country, I think reminding myself of that, and just do the best you can, and don't, it's almost cliche, but don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff, and I do want to say this, that I want to leave with this, that we talk about teaching our kids to love the country. It's so important now that we do this now, because there's another 9/11 looming over here. We're going to have to make a decision. If we think for a minute that there aren't people out there who wish to do us harm, then we're being complacent. And kids are so into their phones and it's such a different. It's not just us teaching our kids anymore, and it's not even just the teachers. They see so much coming from all around them. So what they watch more than anything is their parents. So we have to keep our heads on straight and decide what we want them to live in, not just at home. Patriotism begins at home and spreads to community and spreads to country. And I'm so proud of 3,600 communities out there that are making this happen and bringing these communities together, because you will see communities come together. They will come together and they forget all about the divided politics, that they forget about that. And in that spirit, we come together. And this wreath, which was such a simple thing, whoever thought that something as simple as that wreath, that they could lay their hands on and take pause, and it really is a healing thing. And for people to find a way to serve, and serve their community, serve their families, and serve their country, And we will get there because there's a lot of noise on the top, but we go dot to dot. We connect the dots of all these people that feel like-minded. And I'm really proud of the organization, not for what my family has done. I'm very proud of my staff, but I am so proud of these volunteers all over the country that it just makes me very proud.
Well, we talk about community, and I think Wreaths Across America and what you've done and how you've built this organization to be so impactful. And not only at this time of year too. And I think, one of the big things and one of the big differentiators that we look at with Wreaths Across America, and when we talk about Veterans Day and Memorial Day, we talk about, single days where we pay tribute, but the mission is enduring. The mission is year round. The effort is year round. And there's an incredible amount of people, as you mentioned, who are involved in this all across the country. And it's one common goal. It's one common mission. It's one common vision to remember, honor, and teach. And we have to continue to live up to that and continue to support the efforts of Wreaths Across America and everybody who's involved. And I'm so thankful to have spent some time with you here today, Karen. And I look forward to watching over the next couple of weeks and seeing the convoy as it leaves Maine and it heads down south and makes its way to Arlington and spreads out throughout the entire country. As we move towards December 17th. And I encourage everybody who wants to get involved to please do so. It's so simple. They just got to go to wreathsacrossamerica.org. They can sign up there. They can sign up in any capacity that they want across so many different ways to get involved. And they can even listen to Wreaths Across America radio. So plenty of ways to be involved.
Right. I'm glad you said that because I was just thinking if I didn't mention Wreaths Radio, I'd probably hear from some people around here. So thank you for mentioning that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. American Jedburghs went out to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Director to the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As a former member of Special Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast donates a percentage of all proceeds to the Green Beret Foundation, supporting America's Special Forces and their families. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.